Those Chaos ships are led by Abaddon the Despoiler, War Master of the Black Legion at the head of the 12th Black Crusade with his Planet Killer able to destroy an entire planet.
This week in game news, we have plenty of Nintendo happenings. Apple unveiled the new Apple TV and made a bit of a push for games. Harmonix unveiled Beat Sports, which is apparently like Wii Sports with a musical twist. The Boston Festival of Indie Games is happening this weekend in Boston, and as per usual, we have all the latest news of upcoming and new video games. This is the Blackman and Robin Game News Update. The Final Fantasy IX remix album, Worlds Apart, was released on ocremix.org this week. We'll be playing some of the songs during today's episode of Game News Update. We thank ocremix.org for letting us use the music. It contains remixes from 57 different artists. You can download it from ff9.ocremix.org. Oh, and speaking of Final Fantasy, Square Enix announced that Final Fantasy V would be coming to Steam. This time, it's the Game Boy Advance port of the game instead of the ugly 3D mobile port that we might have gotten stuck with. After all, that's how they released Final Fantasy IV on PC, and it was really ugly. We have some screenshots of this game over at blackmanandrobin.com if you'd like to see more of it. Final Fantasy V will be available on PC on September 24, 2015. While I do think that the $15 that Square Enix is charging for a game that's 23 years old is a little bit much, frankly, I'm happy it's getting a PC release at all. Final Fantasy V is one of the more obscure Final Fantasy games. If you really must play them all, then you're gonna want to get this edition of the game. We have a rather interesting bit of hardware news. No, it's not another water-cooled PC. It's the Game Kid. This gender-neutral open-source handheld console that might or might not get a trademark lawyer's socks in a knot is currently on Kickstarter, and it's a very interesting project. The Game Kid is built for use with a Raspberry Pi. In case you've not heard of Raspberry Pi, just know that it's a tiny hackable computer that's popular with hobbyists and educators. The Game Kid looks like a neat project if you're into emulation and small-screen mobile gaming. It's very clear that it draws its design from the Nintendo Game Boy. Interestingly enough, it is possible to plug in a mouse and keyboard to the Game Kid. Why you would want to do this, I don't know. Perhaps you'd be plugging it into a larger display using the HDMI output on the Game Kid? Perhaps. Whatever the case, I think that the Game Kid is a rather neat project. If you help kickstart the project now, yours should arrive sometime next year. This week marked the 16th anniversary of the Sega Dreamcast's launch in the United States. On account of this, we released another episode of the Blackman and Robin Irregular Game Show about the Dreamcast and its legacy. Also in this episode are the details about how you can enter to win a Dreamcast from us, or a Steam key for the Dreamcast collection. Check out the episode if you want the details. Sega, meanwhile, didn't make any Dreamcast-related announcements, but they did release Hatsune Miku, Project Mirai DX, on the Nintendo 3DS. It's a rhythm game starring the world's most popular virtual singer, which is neat if you're into that. Of course, if Hatsune Miku happens to be your waifu or something, I mean no disrespect. Moving on to game releases, this week The Stanley Parable was released on Steam for Linux. In case you've not heard of The Stanley Parable, it's an absolutely fantastic adventure game of sorts. Essentially, The Stanley Parable is a game that plays with you. In The Stanley Parable, you play as Stanley. Yeah. You're a completely normal office worker who notices that things are a little bit awry. A narrator describes what you're doing and what you should be doing. And should you veer off course from what the narrator says to do, well, that's when things get interesting. I'm not going to say much more because it's very easy to spoil this game. What I will say is that The Stanley Parable makes some very interesting commentary about the way that we perceive stories in video games. If you're gaming on Linux and you don't own this one yet, I recommend picking it up. Smite has been released on Steam for PC this week. In case you've not heard of Smite, you should know that it's a very popular mythology-themed MOBA that's also out on the Xbox One. The game has been doing quite well over there and on PC thus far. It seems that the reason for the Steam release has been to expand the player base. Well, it's working, and I finally got around to downloading the game. I'll be sure to at least try it out so as to have a better frame of reference when talking about Smite in the future. The MMORPG Otherland has just hit Steam Early Access. It's based on the Tad Williams series of the same name, which is set in a world in which full immersion virtual reality, think along the lines of Sword Art Online, is available. The game itself isn't available in VR, but it does have an explorable multiverse composed of various worlds. There are sci-fi and fantasy places to explore, and thus far the game has gotten mixed reception on Steam. It may be one to keep an eye on if you're into MMOs. Iron Tower Studios has announced the final content update for their RPG, The Age of Decadence. The game is currently in early access on Steam and is now set to see a full release on October 14, 2015. The game has a rather unique setting. It's inspired by the fall of the Roman Empire and is very story-heavy. Sure, there are monsters to fight and such, but the game calls for quite a bit of plotting and has been compared to the older Fallout games. Thus far, the players and the press have lauded the game for its richly woven story and gameplay. Considering the game's been in development for 10 years, it's bound to boast a ton of content. I'm curious as to how many words are in the story. This early access game is currently available on PC. Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time is now available for Xbox One, PC, Mac, and Linux. It's a co-op space shmup in which you and a partner must rescue space bunnies, fight the forces of anti-love with lasers, and try not to die. It's a simple premise with a lot of challenge, and the game is expertly crafted, having won multiple awards prior to its completion. Personally, I love the game's soft, neon aesthetic, and it's definitely something that's going on my wishlist. Since I'm currently waiting for the Behemoth's Pit people, there's a little opening in my heart for a good new couch co-op game. I'll most likely give Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time a shot. I'll be sure to let you know what I think about it. Also, Ryan Henwood's music for the game is incredible. The roguelike platformer 20XX is going to beta on September 15, 2015. This Mega Man-inspired game has been coming along nicely and looks really quite good. Thus far, players have had good things to say about the game. I can't wait to see how the finished version turns out, and it's currently available on Steam for PC. Over in Steam Greenlight news, one game that caught my eye was Staxel, a game that's a bit like a multiplayer version of Harvest Moon. Think Animal Crossing, in which you live in a small town, farm things, cook stuff, etc. Multiplayer is optional, but it sounds like it'll add on quite a bit to this upcoming laid-back game. If this sounds like your cup of tea, you might want to vote for it on Steam Greenlight. Judging by the enthusiastic response of Steam users, it'll be greenlit quite quickly. Staxel is set to be released in 2016 for PC. Super Mario Maker has been released on the Wii U. This game allows you to create your own custom Mario levels. Thus far, it's gotten great critical reception, and the players have already made some really cool things with it. Also, Nintendo has released a video called Mario Myths with Mr. Miyamoto, in which Shigeru Miyamoto debunks some myths about the Super Mario series, and confirms our suspicions that he's Bowser Jr.'s mom. You can watch the full thing at blackmanandrobin.com. Just look for September 12, 2015 Game News Update in the search if the post for this episode is not on the front page. In an interview with Eurogamer, Shigeru Miyamoto confirmed that Pikmin 4 is coming. It was quite a surprise reveal from one of Nintendo's creative heads that the garden-themed RTS was very close to completion. In the Pikmin games, you land on a planet inhabited by tiny creatures that are half plant, or mostly plant, maybe, and they're willing to help you survive and collect things. It's a great series. Personally, I'm a big fan of Pikmin. The original game was the first I'd ever played on a console, and I feel a little guilty having not yet played Pikmin 2 and 3. Mr. Miyamoto didn't reveal when Pikmin 4 would be released, or if it would be on the Wii U or on the Nintendo NX, which is Nintendo's in-development console that we're supposed to be hearing more about next year. A trailer has been released for the upcoming Pokemon Go, a Pokemon game set in the real world. That's right, folks. It's an augmented reality Pokemon game in which you chase around Pokemon in real-life locations, employing your phone's GPS. Additionally, you'll be able to purchase what's being called a Pokemon Go Plus, which is a device that connects to your smartphone's Bluetooth to let you know when you're near a Pokemon. Frankly, I don't know what to think about this. On the one hand, I'm glad that Nintendo's releasing a Pokemon game for iOS and Android, and seeing as it's being developed by Niantic, the studio behind the sci-fi AR game Ingress, I'm sure it'll be fun. On the other hand, how will it actually play, and why isn't there any news about this game for the 3DS, or at least some way to tie it in with your Miiverse accounts? This could be amazing if integrated with an existing Pokemon game, though I'm sure it'll still be great as a standalone. Of course, the game's not out yet, so I should probably refrain from making judgmental statements. In other mobile game news, Star Wars Uprising has just been released on iOS and Android. It's a free top-down action game from Kabam, and it's set between the events of Episode 6 and the upcoming Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. Apparently, it does have some in-app purchases and won't run right for some folks, but for the most part, it's gotten pretty good reception. I downloaded it to my phone and must say that it's quite large. For a 3D mobile ARPG, it looks pretty good and runs nicely on my Lenovo K3 Note. Just keep in mind, my Lenovo K3 Note has 2 GB of RAM. If I can make the time for it, I'll be sure to post a first impressions piece to blackmanandrobin.com, so keep an eye out for that.
Emperor Palpatine is dead. He and a second Death Star battle station were destroyed by Alliance forces earlier today. This does not mark the end of the Empire. Claim your freedom and your future.
In fighting game news, a new trailer has been unveiled for Rashid, the latest new character to join Street Fighter V. He's of Middle Eastern descent, and his V-trigger attack is a tornado. I have to say that I'm really digging his character design. It's neat to see Capcom unveiling something so entirely new. Hopefully he plays well in the finished game. A new live-action trailer has been released for Destiny: The Taken King. It has a fantastic sense of musicality. While we're talking about Destiny, the Taken King expansion is going to take up a fair amount of hard drive space. If you have a PS3 or Xbox 360 that doesn't have a whole lot of space, don't despair. Activision is going to send players in this situation a 32GB flash drive for free, so long as they're existing or active Destiny players. This is a nice move on their part, and a smart one. It helps keep the player base united, even if they're on last-gen consoles. Bad news for all 5 fans of the Xbox Live Indie Games program. It's going to be shut down in 2017. In case you're not familiar with it, the XBLIG was a program for indie developers to create games for the Xbox 360 using the XNA development framework. The XBLIG was announced in 2006, and it opened the way for indies to easily put games on the Xbox 360. As a developer, it's no longer possible to purchase a subscription for the service at this point in time. In September 2017, the marketplace will be shut down. I've played a few games from the service. Some were dreadful, some were mediocre, a few were quite good. It was a nice initiative on Microsoft's part to bring indies onto their platform, and many indie developers got their start on it. The platform wasn't without issues. It's not possible to play these indie games offline, and Microsoft hasn't announced any sort of patch that'll allow you to play the games without being connected to the internet. That said, they have 2 years to actually release this patch, so hopefully it happens soon. Because the Xbox Live Indie Games Marketplace is shutting down, this feels like an appropriate week to give away a game from the aforementioned marketplace. So this week, we'll be giving away a copy of DLC Quest. DLC Quest is an extremely short platformer that makes fun of DLC and the video game industry at large. Entry is easy, we have details over at blackmanandrobin.com. The BAFTA-nominated 80 Days, a game inspired by Jules Verne's Around the World in 80 Days, is coming to PC. The 2014 Time Magazine Game of the Year is a multiplayer interactive fiction adventure in which you play as Passepartout, assistant to Phileas Fogg, and you must help plan his route, keep an eye on finances, and prevent Mr. Fogg from getting killed. The game has won and been nominated for so many awards on account of its story. There are over 500,000 words in this game. The story is different on every playthrough, and the game's already a big hit on mobile. This PC port of the game comes with a ton of fresh content, including 30 new cities, over 150,000 new words to the story, and a couple of big plot lines. Of course, it looks even better than the mobile version, and it'll be out on September 29th for Mac and PC. In Kickstarter news, there are a couple games that caught my attention this week. The first is The Networks, a tabletop game in which you play as a television executive getting your hands on shows, stars, and ads to build a TV network for most viewers. Frankly, this game reminds me of my everyday life. It's possible to play with 1 to 5 people, and it'll be out June of 2016.
So please, back the networks today and help me fulfill my dream of...
Sorry.
The other game to catch my eye was the ethereal Essence, a surreal exploration game in which you have no memory and no idea what's going on around you or where you are. You just need to explore in order to find your purpose and the truth of the world you find yourself lost in. According to the Kickstarter page, it's much more than just exploring, however. There are myths to solve, and solving them employs mechanics based on the difference in each world, perhaps with color, light, or gravity. Essence makes some pretty big promises. Here's hoping it delivers when it comes out next September. Great news for Fallout fans! This week, Bethesda announced that Fallout 4 will be receiving the Creation Kit sometime in 2016. Essentially, it's a toolbox for modding the game that Bethesda has been using internally for developing Fallout. Besides being available on PC, the mods that you create for Fallout 4 will also be available on the Xbox One and PlayStation 4. Fallout 4 is set to be released on PC and the aforementioned consoles on November 10, 2015. Dota 2 has been updated. The Reborn edition of Valve's tremendously popular MOBA is now the standard version of the game. You can't play the old version in multiplayer. The reason for this is because Valve is making the move to Source 2, the new version of the engine that they're going to be using for all their games from the future on. It's harder, better, faster, stronger, etc., and gives them more room for new features, better graphics, and all that jazz. If you've been playing Dota 2 with a lower-end PC, good news. The Source 2 engine is actually more optimized than the original. Your computer should handle this new version of Dota 2 better than it handled the previous version. As a Dota player, I confess that I've not played very much in the last couple months, but I have played some games in the Reborn edition of Dota 2, and have to say that the user interface changes are very welcome. Additionally, Reborn brings custom games, finally allowing you to shake things up as you see fit. You can create your own modes, absurd challenges, or even create a playable story. Custom games are something that just makes sense for Dota 2. The game was born of mods after all, and it wouldn't be right if the finished product didn't support them. Regarding the upcoming XCOM 2, we have good news and bad news. On the one hand, it's now available to pre-order on Steam, which could be good or bad news depending on how you look at pre-orders. In truly bad news, however, while the game costs about $60 for North American players, in Australia it costs the equivalent of $90 US. Why is this the case? Well, it has been historically more expensive to send things to Australia. After all, it's quite a trip to ship these things, and of course taxes. The price on digital software, it seems, is some sort of bizarre artifact. It's not as though all the bits for XCOM 2 have to be mailed in a box. Fortunately, there are other marketplaces that one can obtain XCOM 2 from in Australia for a significantly cheaper price. Why 2K priced the game so high on Steam is strange. That said, something similar did happen with the release of Civilization Beyond Earth, so it's not entirely surprising. Finally, we leave you with the teaser trailer for the upcoming Samurai Bamboo. This is a gorgeously animated trailer, and the game is coming soon to iOS and Android. Well, that's it for this week's game news. For all the latest, be sure to follow at Blackman and Robin on Twitter and Instagram. For commentary on the latest game news and other stuff, follow me at Jordan_Cameron, and don't forget to visit blackmanandrobin.com to find out more about our Dreamcast giveaway as well as our Steam Key giveaway of the week.